cliche of art is not finished, it's abandoned. Yes, it can always be better. But you have to finish and you have to put it out, because otherwise you're just the guy talking about your art and you're not the guy doing it. You get better by doing it, finishing it, learning from that process, and moving on to the next thing.
All right, welcome to another session of Playing with Python with Apache NiFi, and we've got a lot to do today. Fortunately, none of it is painful, at least I hope not. Last week, we fixed a huge bug with the authentication services that were breaking a bunch of stuff, particularly for Ivan. We also fixed a bug we found while fixing that bug, which is always good. Around certificates in newer versions of Python, particularly on Mac, which is where I'm doing most of my development. So that is being pushed to main. It's available now if you build your own release. We're going to release it as the next version, probably in 0.17, but maybe as a dot release for 16 where we are now. We'll see. Today we're going to have a look at our backlog, see what people have requested, see if there's any new stuff, do a little grooming, and then we're going to work on some fun stuff, which I wanted to put into the release, like a placement recommendation doofer or utility to help people out, make things pretty. So let's crack on. I'm running just a quick full test in the background just to make sure that I haven't broken anything in merging back to main for the last update. Pretty sure it's fine, but good to make sure. It's nearly finished on Pi 2.7 anyway, so we'll let that finish out. Let's go have a look. We've got pull request. Let's check that first. So it looks like Xerix has updated his PR. He's updated it for the moustache template. He's not sure how to do a proxy test. He'd like a hand with that. That's cool. That's cool. Let's have a look at the file changes. So, if proxy is set and proxy string is not socks, then do the business. Else, if socks is the proxy statement, do that business. That's cool. So it's effectively a non-breaking change because the default behavior does not change unless that particular string is encountered, which is pretty cool. And he has added the dependency, which is good, and then he's added here to the REST client template, which matches the REST client that he's live edited up there. So that's cool. I would like to put a test in for this. But it's not going to break anything for it to be available in the way that he's implemented it. And should we be strict on needing a test for a minor change like this? I don't think we need to be. I think it's good if we are. What I might do is make an issue to track that this should have a test added later. And then we can merge this as a non-breaking minor change for the current release. So what we can do is we can grab this. A new issue. And tests for socks proxy. Socks proxy implementation was provided in all 253 without tests. It is a minor non-breaking change, so we can merge it, but we should come back and add tests for various proxy implementations later. We may never do that. We should do that, but we're not going to do it right now because we'll help that dude out. I will assign it to me because I'm making it. It is a enhancement, and we're just going to sort of ignore that at the moment. Cool, so let's go back to his PR. So I'm going to check that out and do a quick test and then probably merge it once this is finished. So we can do that. And what else is in there? Let's go look at our issues log. See if we've got any updates. Recently updated. That one. PyPy download link is broken. Has anybody responded to this? No. He hasn't gotten back. I think we'll leave that just in case he does come back. Get controller does not give the result. That's a different one. Creating policies, enable disable processes. This is one we were going to do for version 17. Prevent processes from overlapping. This is the one I want to do today. Add users to a group. Yeah, so there's been no updates, which is cool. That means we can go and work on the things we want to work on. Nobody's made any urgent requests for particular things to be done. I think that's pretty legit. So the first thing we'll do is this guy's this pull request. So that's pull request 253. Just looking at what the command is for the GitHub command line tool to remind me. It's ghpr checkout 253. Yeah, cool. So once this test completes, where are we up to? 97%. So close. Do. Man, waiting for tests. Yeah, it's so exciting to wait for tests. Also, my camera is really red today. Like, it's alarmingly red. It's kind of weird. The light in here hasn't really changed much. If I get closer, it gets less angry. Maybe it's just OBS being weird. There we go. Tests have completed. All green. It'll go and do flake and whatnot. But we're not going to be worried about that. So let's go and check out that PR. Come on, terminal. Oh, wait a minute. There's a second one. We've already got one. Let's have this one. Man, I should just use a Docker image for everything. So GHPR checkout 253. Oh, no. Yeah, because we've got config.py pointing at our test host. So let us remove that and uncomment that. And actually, we can just sort of hit revert. That will make Git happy. Very good. Okay, and let's try again. Cool. Got our branch. And we want to be on this branch, please. Thank you very much. Great. Let's drop our test host back in. Cool. And we can run a test for this. So that's going to appear in the REST client. Let's just go and make sure it has appeared in the REST client. Yep, so he's got his different pool managers. Proxy manager, pool manager, just to spot the difference there. Make sure that paying attention to that. Now that's for NiFi. Did he do the same for registry? He has not done it for registry, and I feel like that's an oversight. I think it should be for both. Now, is that PR on a fork? Is that committed from his fork, or is that... Yeah, so that's from his fork. Yeah, I would have to grab his version and then commit to that. Then he would have to accept that and blah, blah, blah. Ideally, this would also be done for registry. I mean, it doesn't have to be, but if we regenerate the client, because he's added it to the template, this will get added to registry. So let me just check. For the template, he has updated rest.mustache. Yeah, so he's done that. So this will do the same thing for a registry client. What I could do is I could accept his PR and then just quickly regen the clients so that it's tidy. Yeah, let's test his PR and then let's regen the client so that that will be tidy. And this will actually fail because there's an additional dependency, so stop. Very good. We will need to recreate the tox. So because he updated the requirements to add PySox. So while that's happening, let's go have a look at the other thing we want to work on today, which is the placement utility. Pretty handy. Prevent processes from overlapping. So trying to prevent processes from overlapping when I run code, I want the code to detect if there is already a processor in that location. So the thing about this is that it's not a native NiFi feature. There's nothing in NiFi that says, oh, your processor overlaps another processor, because NiFi doesn't care. The visual of the graph is just a convenience for a human. NiFi itself needs nothing like that. Everything's addressed by reference. What we can do is, and he's got a little option here, which is nice and tidy. Actually, it's quite nice. You need to account for the different sizes of the objects, but it's pretty good. I've already got a bit of code that does this, which I linked earlier. So what we'll do is we'll pull this in and make it a utility and then test it. And I think that should be fine. For key, processor, and you make process list location, yeah. Basically it's 0, 1, 2, 3. So times I, whatever I is. So 300 and 500 are generic block sizes. This will just do one big row. or I've got a thing that does arranges them in sort of a snake. But this would be fine, one big row. Or year. People don't do Red Hot Chili Peppers jokes, I guess. But we're not going to do one big row or year. We are going to use the snake. Right, how's testing going? Yeah, cool. So Tox is running, recreating. I don't expect this to fail. And if it doesn't fail on the first one, it's not going to fail on any of them because it is just the REST client and we are not testing socks directly. We're just making it available. So what we're going to do is we're just going to cancel that. Great. And close that out. And accept that PR. So I'm just going to do that. Pretty minor change anyway. Cool beans. All right, so let's go back to root. Lovely, lovely. Let's drop out of this branch. Let's go back to main. Let us update main. Cool. And let's switch back to it. Bring that with us. Very good, thank you. And what we will do is we will go and just pop his proxy piece into the next bit. So let's make ourselves a little branch to work on. It's an 017 update just for the sake of labeling it. That'll do. So 070 project improvements. This will do. Great. Let's take that REST piece out of NiFi, which looks like this exactly, and go into the REST piece for registry, which looks like this exactly, and now it looks like that. And that is it. That is all that needs. And we can just commit that because that is super trivial. Well, we should test it. We should run the test before we commit. Try and be a good human who tests things, but it will be fine. It's a super trivial change. One big row, or year. Waiting. Anticipating. Alright. While that's running. So I've actually got this code on another branch. I don't intend to merge that branch. There was some work I did around working with NiFi agents that I don't think we want to retain. The reason for that is that NiFi generally and EFM, well, NiFi is being merged back into the main NiFi code base, the Java NiFi, that is. The C++ is doing a thing at the moment. I'm not sure exactly if that's going to say separate or be merged as, you know, C++ code under just a different folder. But EFM is also going to carry on doing its own thing, which is great. But the implementation I did here around agent, working with agents, which is this one here, is pretty specific to EFM. So create a processor, a connection, and it's a very limited implementation. Like this was a very, very tiny implementation just for EFM, and I am not sure that I should merge it into the main code base because I don't have a lot of EFM testing capability set up, and it's quite a lot of extra work, and I don't know that anybody wants it. I think if people wanted it, there would be issues requesting it. There isn't. So I'm not necessarily going to go after that. But this suggest object position, yeah, this is handy. So we are going to we are going to use that. So while that test is running, I'm going to make it a utility, because I think that while it is used for NiFi and it is part of canvas positioning, canvas is already really full, and it may be used by more than just the main NiFi canvas, may be used by other stuff. So let's head in here. REST exceptions, exception handlers, bypass slash encoding, various utils, infer object. I think this is a good spot. Sort of fits in with this group. So we are going to want to rework this just eeny weeny bit. So snakes down, then up from left to right with spacing and row count. Object spacing 200. Object per column 5. Now that will work for processes, but process groups are larger, so I'm going to give that 50% bigger spacing by default. We'll see how that looks. It's going to be 5 per column, and then go across. We want to scope this, so no longer scope to the flow name. We will want to scope it to a process group, I think. So you'll want to, well, interesting. I suppose you could give a list of objects or a whole process group. Because what this is doing is this is setting positions. So we get the list of the flow components. That's great. If there's nothing, just suggest a new position, which is great, just the next available one. If not, this looks through the current positions, so it gets a count of the number of objects we're looking at. It works out the max for that, and then the max for Y. Yeah, okay, that's straightforward. Then it works out the number of sizes and whether to freeze or not at the end of a row before moving across. We do snake so that you can easily connect between them. If it was just down and then down and then down, you'd have this big arrow that connects from one bottom of one to the top to the next. And so then it returns a position. So that's how I did it. Okay, so it looks like the way I structured it is that you give it a flow and it suggests the next position that should be used in that flow. It doesn't respace everything in a process group, just suggests the next position. But that could be useful anyway, I think. So you would scope it to a process group, it would look at all the objects in the process group, and it would give you the next free spot, essentially following this pattern. Okay. So I think we scope it to a process group. So we, what are we using for PG? We're using PG or process group. Let's have a look in Canvas. Yeah, PG, PGID. I think PGID is a good default. So let's change this. And we want to get the child components of that flow using Canvas. So maybe it should be a Canvas thing, because we are using a bunch of Canvas features, and I try not to cross-pollinate too much. I guess it's not a cluster utility, it is more of a Canvas utility and positions. Maybe we'll do that. Might change my mind again later. It's all about figuring things out as we go. Okay, so what we want to do is get all the child objects of that PG and look at all their positions. So it'll be list all It's sort of list all objects. I don't know if I have a generic list all object. I've got list all processes, but that's different. There's input ports and output ports and funnels, and I really don't have a meta function for get all children of. Well, if we get a process group and put a bunch of stuff in it, let's see if there's an easy way for me to figure out what should be next. Because you sort of want to figure out what the bottom right, well, the rightmost object is, and then suggest away from that if we move from left to right. All right, let's make a test case. So let us go to our control host. Here is some rubbish from what we were doing last time. Stop. Very good. Delete. Very good. And are we still running our test? Yes, we are. It's not finished yet. That's cool. We'll make a generic PG, so base PG. And then within our base PG, we will make inner PG. And we'll make some other objects. So we'll have like a processor here. And a funnel. What other canvas object? We can have a remote process group of some description. And we have input ports. We have output ports. Okay, so these are, oh, we can have labels as well. I don't think we care about labels. I think overlapping labels is fine, but all of these things should not be overlapped. So we want to get all of these children listed and then work out where we're going to position things. So let's go and play with our console. Cool. So import NiFi. Be good. And we want to connect to our environment. What I might do is just make a little test script for convenience. No, I don't need to worry at the moment. So we want to NiFi.utils.set endpoint to. Well, actually, our default endpoint should be fine. So we should be able to just do NiFi.canvas.get. Yeah, because our defaults are set, so it should just work. So there's our canvas. So let's start with get process group. And we'll get using the name base PG, just what I think you called it. So, all lowercase. Cool. There we go. We'll assign that to a variable, and then we'll explore the JSON document that was returned. So this is a process group definition. All the bits and pieces. It tells us about the parameter group context and the position of the PG. That's the position of the PG itself, not all the children. Tells us about the component, the ID, parent, its position, and yeah. So this return, we have this thing called NiFi extended, which gives you the process group entity and tells you all the child objects of the PG by giving you back the flow. Now the flow, it's saying that it has no funnels, no connections, one input port, one output port, one process group, one processors. Interesting, it says it has no funnels, because I'm quite sure. Oh, I thought we made a funnel. Did we somehow delete it? Oh, maybe. Yeah, funnels aren't labeled, so when that previous test run ran, it would have deleted them. That's cool. So that's there now. Let's rerun our object collection. There we go. There's our flow. So it's got a funnel. So that's just the flow of that process group, which is handy. We could probably just use get flow for that process group. Why don't we do that? Let's have a look. So get flow. So maybe R2 equals NiFi.canvas.getFlow. But you need the PGID. Get process group works by a name. Get flow works by ID. Double check that. Yeah. But it requires the ID because it's a built-in call. So for convenience, we're just going to use the get process group. And then they can supply a name or an ID. Or we could just assume they have the ID. So if we do it this way, we can do r.id. Let's have a look at R2. Yeah, there's the flow. Doesn't really make a lot of difference which one we use, and I think that it's more convenient to use the get process group. So let's look at that. We'll use extended, we will use process group flow, and we will use the flow information. And then for each of these, we can build up a map of where things are. So we can say, hey, this funnel has a position, DTO object, X and Y, which we can do something with. So if we go to our, it might be useful to have like a get positions thing, but in the meantime, let's suggest object position. Maybe we should do like get object positions. Well, this already sort of handles that. So we will say PG ID, require an ID. Doesn't really hurt anybody, does it? So then we can say flow components equals get flow PG ID. Great. And then we'll move to our get flow entity. Here's our flow information. Get flow. So get flow PGID. Now we say, so let's say this is a flow entity. That's what we get. Now if we request a bad PGID, does this break? So we'll do get process group Bob, which does not exist. So it returns nothing. If I do get flow, that gives you an error because the ID does not exist. So get process group is superior. So we can say PG name. Will be good. Will be good. Get process group by PGID by ID. There we go. Check the implementation of that. That is the correct thing to pass in. Get process group identifier type. Yeah. So identifier type greedy equals false. Lovely. So if now for flow, what we care about is that this whole thing comes back. We want to check that the flow is provided. So we are looking for if not flow, it's process group entity, isn't it? Really, let's be very strict about our naming. Process group entity is that. If not process group entity, then return a position object. So it's a NiFi position. Is it just a position object? I think it is. We'll just check that. There we go. Just a standard position model, X and Y. Not very exciting. We can use that. So object spacing is just 300. So if it finds nothing, i.e. the process group doesn't exist, then it should just return a default position of 300 by 300, which is fine. We can actually set a default here. So what we might do is have a default. Default equals a tuple of 400, 400. And we might say here default 0 and default 1. Like that. So that keeps the default used. And somebody can override that, which is great. So then we want to see if there are current positions in the stuff returned. So we want to collapse this down to the position of the components within the PG. So shall we do a list comprehension for this? So I don't think that's going to work. Well, we might be able to do it. So let's see. So current positions equals I dot position for I in the process group entity dot NiFi standard dot process group flow dot flow. So there's all my objects, but those need to be iterated through. Is there a tidier way to do that? Yes, there is. So X for X in this for X in the list of the object types I want, which is funnels. Input ports. Skipping labels, output ports. We care about process groups. We care about processors. We care about remote process groups. Not actually even sure that'll work. Might work. Let's find out. Give me my software app so it's easier to read. Thank you. This might go burp. Let's find out. Oh yeah, it's not defined as process group entity. Process group entity equals R. It's not iterable. Oh, that's so annoying. Because, you know, it does actually have the bits I want. So R dot extended dot flow dot process group flow dot what does it actually have? Does it not have like a keys or something to make it iterable? I might need to modify the client here so it makes these things iterable. Let's reduce. to dict. I suppose to dict would work. Then that will have keys and stuff. So if we did, if we went back and did this, that, I hate it when it does that. IDEs are useful except when they're not. Okay, what does that come out as? Oh, that's just giving me the key each time. Ah, yeah, because I'm just looping around through everything. So I want to go for X in that list, if X in dictionary, extract the positions. So for X in that list, if X in oh, that's just doing a list compression. Yeah, okay, so that's kind of a messy way to do it. All right, so let's just tidy this up then. So what we are interested in is the objects are to dict here, and we want that list as well, and we want to cut that out, so like that, and we don't need that. So those are the objects we're interested in. These are the obj types we're interested in. And then current positions equals i.position for I in will this work? I don't think that will work because it'll say X is not defined. Because I am not making that a yeah, because this should be a second list comprehension. I don't think that will work, but I will try it. Object types, current positions. Yeah, because it's generating a list object. This is where like live development gets annoying when you're trying to remember how to do list comprehensions in Python. So I want the positions for each of those objects in those lists. X for X for Y for X and Y. It's really annoying. I could just do if X and if the key is in name. Yeah, that would work. So we could do current positions equals I dot position for I in object by key X for X in object types yeah, that's not going to work either. Let's just do a standard loop to make it easier for somebody else to read when they come along rather than trying to do a fancy list comprehension. So for X in object.key yeah. If X in object types that we're interested in, then add it to positions. Oh, why am I doing this the hard way? I don't understand why I'm doing this the hard way. I guess it makes it easier to read for people. Then positions append it's kind of it. Object is not callable. Object.keys for X and object.types. I'm searching for I in object. Oh, that should be square brackets, not the curly brackets. Like that. So there's my object types, straight list, great. There's my object list, say process groups, they are all lists. They're a list of dict objects, each of which has a position object. So for X in object.keys, which is a string name, if X in object types, then we want to get, that's a dict. So say X equals funnels, then obj of X equals that, which is a list. So why are we getting dict object has no attribute position? Because one of them must not have a position attribute. Okay, so let's check. So process groups has position, remote process groups is empty. Empty? Didn't I make a remote process group? Oh, it got removed as well. Okay. Localhost 8080/NiFi. Okay, it got tidied up earlier. All right, cool. And you're all there. So let's go back and recollect that object. That's what we want. And then object can be refreshed to this. Very good. Still showing no remote process groups. That's not correct. It should definitely be showing remote process groups. Why is that not working? Let's look at this, our base object, and make sure that it has in the flow. Yeah, remote process groups has a listed item. Oh, because process group entity has not been updated, so this should be R. There we go. Now it has remote process groups. So does remote process groups have a position? Yes, it does. Very good. Processes. Does that have a position? Yes, it does. Input port has a position. Output port has a position. Funnel has a position. Everything has a position. So why would that be failing? So let's go back to our call here. For x and object.keys. Yes, if x and object types. Position append I position for I. Man, so annoying. Alright, let's look through our expressions then. So object.keys. Process groups, remote process group, process imports, outputs, connection labels, funnels, yes. If x and object types, which that is. Yeah, that's well, we don't have to do that. We can do that again, I guess, instead of a list comprehension. So for I in object, for I in that object, positions dot append I dot position. I mean, that's not a complicated request. Dect object has no attribute permission. All right, let's start printing out. Hey Tim, welcome to the party. It's super exciting today. I'm playing with Python. So exciting. Print. Most of these don't actually have a status. Like, just print the ID. Now one has no attribute ID. Man. Come twitching for DFX and flank and SSB. Yeah. Well, SSB, I mean, we could start doing that right now. SSB is available to install somewhat publicly. DFX will be a few weeks, I think. So that should be pretty good. We should start getting prepared for that. I think you're working on those flows that we're going to use in the launch for it. So maybe you could like start twitching about preparing the flows and which ones are going to be included or not included. Maybe do that with Pierre. That would be pretty cool. You have a few Flink SQL for that, and so does Andre. Yeah, so we should be testing that stuff out, and we could twitch about that. That'd be cool. Go through a test run of the Edge to AI workshop with that Flink SQL in it, make sure that that's working out well. That'd be a good review session worth recording, I think. A lot of people to be interested in that. But why do these not have positions? I hate working this stuff out live. My brain's too worried about like people looking at me going, you can't even do a simple Python lift comprehension to do the simple Python lift comprehension. That's why live coding is perilous. Perilous, perilous. Okay, instead of positions append, let's just print the position. Which, for some reason, probably still won't work. Yeah. Why is that not working? You know why? Because object is... Well, we've made object a dict. Yeah. So object of x, which is like funnel. So object funnel 0. Oh, really? Oh, funnels. I'm sorry. Has no attribute position. Oh, maybe it's not actually attributes. I have to key them. That'll be why. Derp, derp, derp. I'm used to these being named attributes, not dict keys. So now we have a list of positions from our various objects. Now we can work out what to do with them, which is great. So that's current positions. Good. Now we can turn that back into a list comprehension. You're judging, are you, Greg? Thank you very much. That definitely helps my morale and general happiness, right? Oh man, sitting here doing idiocy. So that could be a list comprehension, but kind of, I think it's easier for other people to read if it's written out like that, and we don't have to play code golf with this stuff. Otherwise, it's like I for I and x if x is in list for I and x, which nobody else gets but people who really like Python. So let's update current positions. So we'll work from that. These are our current positions. That's really good. Our console, our object count is trivial. We've got 6 objects. We check that that's correct. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 objects. That's all great. Now we work out some position stuff. So, dict has no attribute x. Yeah, because these are... This is where EFM and NiFi and NiFi differ. So in NiFi, these come through as dict properties. They don't come through as... Well, I guess I converted it to dict for my own convenience because it wasn't iterable, so I guess that's my own fault. But that's cool. I mean, I can just modify these to be like that. That will be fine. So the highest X position is 1797, which looks correct. Looking at our, I mean, that's a really trivial thing to check. But our highest Y position should be 691 if we check it. Then we check the Y set for this set. So I.Y for, so we need to change that to Y like this. For I in current positions, if I, yeah, so it just wants to get all of the, what I'm doing here is if they're already in columns, then I'm getting the set of objects that are in the rightmost column, essentially, of which there will only be one. But let's run that. So our Y set, there should just be one, which is 691. So that's that one object here that's on our far right hand side. So 797, 691, which will be this output port. So what it's going to do is it's going to say, oh, hey, look, your canvas has got a bunch of stuff being a bit of a mess on it. I'm just going to take the bottom rightmost object, take that column, and just decide to start from there, right? People may not decide that they like that, but shit happens, essentially. So then we can decide whether to freeze X or Y for this, because it's in the what's the word? It's in the right hand side. So if object count, if that's freeze Y true, otherwise freeze Y was false, then we decide to not freeze Y, or otherwise we just carry on. So we've got an if else here that handles our spacing and our setting out. We can do that. Oh, object per column is not set. This must be a default that I have set in the example I was using. So let's find object per column. We set it as a default there, 5. Oh no, I've got it set here. I just haven't set it in the console, that's why. Cool, okay, so let's go back here. This works out our freeze Y is not defined. Yeah, so this is where I've made a little stupidity here. It's doing if then and else. So let me just do that. That should set freeze Y. Yeah, freeze Y is false. So it doesn't really care. Then it will do the spacing. Great. And then it's going to set our out Y. We've already set our out X. So our out X, in fact, we can just return that as a out X. Out Y like this. So 1797 and 391. So that's going to go upwards from that one. It's going to judge that it can do something above it. Put an object here, basically. So we're going to turn a NiFi position using out X, out Y. We can do like this. So there's our position object. So it's going to suggest that as the next position. And so then I could do something like generate a processor using that. So I could say NiFi.canvas.create funnel. That would be fine. Yeah, PGID will be .id and position. So position none. Position is a tuple of int. Now, interesting. All of this stuff is floats, not int. So I should actually go through and make all of this stuff respect that it can be a float. So what we're going to do is we're going to do, well, that we'll have to reload actually. So because we have to re-import the code. So import NiPy. Yeah. PG equals NiPy.canvas.get process group base PG I called it. Cool. And then we can do proc equals NiPy. Oh, that's a new funnel, isn't it? Funnel equals NiPy.canvas.create funnel pg.id and then NiPy.canvas.suggest object position for that PG. So for base PG. Ooh, yeah, so it wants an ID. I did do the ID, didn't I? So it should be pg.id again. So PG is a process group entity. And it has no object NiFi API extended, except it does because it's right there. But that'll be actually inside the here. So we're going to get. Let's shorten that to PG. To shorten our line lengths here a little bit, just to make life easier. So PG equals NiFi dot canvas dot get process group with the ID. So PG2 pg.id ID false. PG2 comes back as a process group entity. That is an interesting, that is a bug, actually. I should fix that. So, get process group. It looks like if I do a get process group, I want to go up, with an ID, it does not give me the extended information. It only does that if I do it by name, which is definitely me screwing up. There you go. Dun, dun. So, if is ID or root, use the process group's ID to get process group of that ID. Else, list all process groups and then filter. But that returns an additional property. So this needs to have that additional property added. So let's go and look at list all process groups. What a way to find a bug, man. It does a flattening of that stuff. Yeah, and it adds NiFi API extended. That is, gets the root flow from that object by recursing the flow for that PG ID if we use recurse flow. What is the underlying call? Get flow, PG ID. Yeah, so it sets this flow, which is get flow for the PG ID, as NiFi API extended attribute. So that, yeah, but it won't be a recursed flow because I need to basically do recurse flow as a call for that ID. So it ends up the same thing here. So it's adding the root flow as the recursed flow. So really what I want to do is the entity set attribute like that, where root flow is actually recurse flow, and that should be in get process group. Are you still judging now, Greg? Because that is a fun bug to find. Yeah, get process group. So if the ID, the out is that, but then we need to go out, set attra, recurse flow of out.id. That should fix that. Let's try and run that again. So if we get by name, PG NiFi extended should exist. Great. If we get by ID, right. Well, I'm glad we found that and fixed it. Now let's run our original test, which was to create a funnel using that. Assertion error in create funnel. Yeah, so position tuple. What am I returning there? Am I not returning a tuple? I'm returning a position object, not a tuple. Now, interesting. I think we should accept both, but I don't think it needs to return a position object. I think that returning a tuple actually is a little more obvious for users. A native object rather than a doesn't need to return a NiFi object, because you might also be using it for something else other than this. So then let's do that again. So our parent, there's our parent PG. We are going to create a funnel in that PG. There we go, like that. Let's see if it's done it. Ba-ba! Put it up there. So that's the distance. Now, that's a separation of 300. So if I look here at position, we've gotten our 391 and the other one's 691. These objects, the largest object are these processors and remote process groups, which take up the space here. So I think that actually the 200 spacing is fine. What I'll do is I'll pull these out and put them into config. So default object spacing and objects per column should be config params. Where's a good place to put them? Logging, default host URLs, yeah, project root, weights, filters, versioning, simple cache, and security context. Here I'm going to add it to the bottom. So we'll say object positioning. These are the defaults used when suggesting the location for a new on the canvas. Like that. And then we will refer to them from how do we import that at the moment? We just import NiFi. Yeah, we don't import config as anything, we just refer to it. Root. So what we'll do is we will instantiate it from the default like that, just to make it easier to read. That should do it. We should add some descriptive information. Okay. Assesses the positions of objects on the canvas in a given process group and suggests, recommends a position for the next object. Objects will snake down and right from following the default spacing and row column counts provided in ipy.config. Cool. PGID is a string. UUID 4 of the PG to assess and Yeah, that'll do. Default is a tuple. Actually, you know what? That doesn't even need to be provided to the function. That can just be set in. That can just be set in the config as well. So object default lock equals like that. We'll just summon it from there. Much tidier. And this needs to be set so that it returns NiFi.config default location like that. Returns a tuple X and Y of the recommended next position. Cool. So that's all gonna work. That can be installed. That's fine. Cool. Pretty easy function, really. Yay! Okay, so we ran that test earlier. Oh, we got some lines that are too long. That is a long line. Let's reformat that like this. And that should be like that. And multiple spaces after. Oh well, I've moved everything now, so we'll rerun our tests in a minute. That'll be fine, that'll be fine. So what I will do is we'll rerun tests. And then we'll commit this to this branch and push it up and then see if the guy wants to test it to see if it solves his problem, see if it does the kind of solution he wants. Or if he thinks something different would be useful. Because it's important when making features to try and meet user stories, not just to go, oh, I think I know what you want, here, have this. Because that's not that useful really, is it? Alright, so let's go have a look at, well, let's remove that test PG. We didn't need that. And let's go back to our issues register. Enable disable processes. What was this one? If I try to start a disable processor with schedule processor, I get a value error if it's disabled. I found out how to enable it, but it'd be nice as an API method. His workaround was to get the processor. If it is, set it to be stopped, update the processor. Well, I mean that, oh yeah, to be stopped instead of disabled. So, so schedule processor could basically have a also disable flag. Let's have a look at schedule processor. Schedule processor. Set a processor to start or stop. Doesn't guarantee that it will. So we check if it's running. Well, these are functions to check if it's running. Processor not start, processor not started. It's a bull, get the processor, check that we've got the processor, set the target, and then schedule component. Then we do monitoring. Yeah, so this is a moderately complex function to fiddle with. So scheduled is our state. Start or stop. So we just may want to add auto enable to this as an option. So we see here, test, get processor. If there's active thread counts of 0, then return true, i.e. is not stopped, else. Okay, so that's just waiting for it to stop. Get processor ID. If it says it's running, test object or component or state equals running, return true, else return false, i.e. it is not running. Okay, fine. What is the processor disabled state? So let's create a disabled processor, and I think that's literally the state you get from it. So, so some processor here, and we'll rename it to be something convenient. We'll call it Bob. Hello, Bob. Right, and then disable Bob. Cool. Let's go back here to our console, and we'll do a get Bob. So p equals NiFi.canvas.get processor. Get processor Bob. And let's look at Bob. So p status, run status, disabled. So, so we just want to change it from disabled to stopped, in essence, if that is the case. And then following his process, he suggested here, you can update the processor to be state stopped instead of disabled, and then carry on. And I think that that is pretty reasonable. PG component state. Yeah, so that's the status. And if we look at component.state disabled, we'll change it to stopped. Cool. I think we can add that. So let's add here after refresh. Call it auto enable. False. Add that here. Whether to enable a processor if disabled. That's all fine. We should maintain our pattern here, although this pattern is a bit deprecated. Yeah, too many commas. Cool, great. So running schedule processor, starting schedule processor, those are just functions. If refresh the object, that is fine. I'll set target. Then it tries to schedule a component. So at this point, we should check the state of the component. So if target dot component dot state is equal to disabled. I think we only care if it's disabled if we are starting the processor, because if they're saying the processor should be stopped and it's disabled, that's a lower run level. We don't strictly want to blow up on that. So if target const equals disabled and scheduled, what we'll do is we'll explicitly say true, even though Python by default would just say, yeah, I know what you mean there. It's a bit easier to read for somebody else coming along afterwards. Then we can say if auto enable equals true, then do stuff, else we want to raise an error. So raise, what kind of error do we want to raise here? Do we want to raise an error, or do we want to let it just throw the... I think actually we can just let it try and do the scheduling, and then you'll get the NiFi error that says, hey, you're trying to enable trying to schedule a disabled processor. So here, if I say a NiFi.canvas.schedule processor, the processor is P, scheduling is true, it's going to throw that error. It's going to say processor is disabled, which is pretty good, generating that value error. It's going through the rest of the module to do it, because it's trying to schedule the processor and that sort of thing. But I think we could explicitly raise a more helpful error. So raise value error, processor is disabled and auto enable is false. There we go. Yeah, I know it's more Pythonic to just do it this way, but I think it's easier to read the other way. Anyway, if auto enable, then we need to do the update. That was in the example. So we want to do target.component.state equals stopped, not disabled, and then we want to do the update processor. Then we want to do update processor target. Well, actually, the way update processor works, I think we can just submit that directly. Let's check update processor. Yeah, what is the update? It's a processor config DTO with the state in it. Yeah. So, because it fills out all of this other details for us. So if we go back to where we were, we can say actually update processor NiFi.NiFi.processor config DTO. And we want to say in that, so go to implementation, properties, descriptors, scheduling. I don't think it's any of these, actually. I think it's a higher level. So he's done it directly. He's just said, hey, update that processor with this PG state. And we could do it that way. I think I'd rather use the function though. Let me look at my test for that. So let's look at tests for update processor. We are just set the scheduling period, but I want to set the component state. I wonder if there's an enable call actually on the processor API. Let me have a look at that. So APIs, I think it's just going to do update state. Let's look at the let us look in our DevTools. That's probably the easiest way to do it. So DevTools, start capturing, enable processor, stop capturing, examine, close all that stuff. So we sent to the processor's API a put on run status, and run status is updated to stopped. So let's have a look in our APIs, processors API. Let's look for run status. Update run status. Yay! Processor run status. Well, I guess we could use that. So it is being sent a revision and stopped. I don't think I have run status in the existing function set at the moment, so run status. Oh, yes I do. Wait, yeah, what's this? That's in schedule controller, well, specifically. But I don't think it's for, that's a remote process group run status. I'm grabbing the run status from component.state, but I don't think I'm explicitly using run status. Yeah. Okay, so that's not the tidiest way for that to have been done. But that's cool. So what we might do is just update the run status. Or we could just use his simple call here. Let's use the simple call. And like that. So now if we refresh, we can import NiFi. Great. We can get, what I'll do is I'll disable Bob again. I will attempt to schedule Bob. And then if I say true, have I not set that properly? Oh yeah. So what I need to do is explicitly say that I want auto enabled. Like that. Auto enable. Process with ID cannot be started because its validation is still being performed. Interesting. Well, that's kind of true because it's not validated. What error do we get? Invalid to start. Timed out waiting to complete. Yeah, I mean, we'd expect that because we know that the state is not valid. So what we probably want to have is another thing in here which checks if a processor can be scheduled. But we do state that we're not checking validity, we're just attempting to start. So I think that this is still correct for what he has requested, but it does introduce that there's some other improvements we could make, like checking validity and that sort of thing, which is cool. That may be worth doing, but this does specifically help the thing that he wants to help. And if it was not requires an upstream connection of some sort. Yeah. So let's delete that. Let's do generate flow file like this. Let's rename it to Bob. So we don't have to just update our code. Great. Now that one can be started. So then if I disable it, we're good. So now if I get Bob again, and I attempt to auto enable Bob, turns true, Bob was successfully started. So in a state where you expect it to work, it will work as expected. If it's invalid, it will not. So we should probably put a check in here that just says, hey, processor is invalid, I can't start. That might be a nice improvement anyway. So let me make the processor invalid, like this, just while we're here. We get Bob's state, we try and start Bob. Bob will fail because it's invalid, we'll time out. Let's have a look at Bob's status. Run status invalid. So that's what we want to check. component state is stopped, validation errors are not none, right? But you can just look at status, run status. It says invalid. If I make Bob valid here and refresh the object, we will see run status equals stopped. So what we need to do is run status needs to be in stopped or disabled or started, therefore not invalid, for this to succeed. So what we should do, refresh is fine, target, so we should add a check here. If target dot, is that component dot status? Yeah, component status is equal to invalid raise value error false. Yeah, cannot schedule. Well, invalid and stopped would be, yeah, so if equals invalid and scheduled is true. So if we're trying to cannot schedule a processor in an invalid state, that's too wordy. Cannot schedule an invalid processor is a shorter and better error. So that's just a quick quality of life improvement. Let's just check that it behaves as I think it will behave. So import NiFi. Get Bob. Schedule Bob. Oh, I did that wrong. Which line is that complaining about? Yep. It's target.component.run status, wasn't it? Target, so Bob dot status dot run status dot run status. My bad. Okay, Bob. Hi, Bob. Can you schedule Bob? Bob can be scheduled. Cool. Let's unschedule Bob. Let's invalidate Bob. Hi, Bob. You are now invalid, Bob. Let's disable Bob. So he's now invalid and disabled within the service. No, that went straight to timeout, so it shouldn't do that. So, because at this point it's not invalid, it's disabled. So actually, this should be after handling the disabled state or not, because that's a different run level. Good thing we're testing, isn't it? Right, let's try that again. I'm not even sure if Tim would bother going to this level of detail, making sure stuff like this works. Cannot schedule an invalid processor. Great. All right, I think that's a nice little quality of life improvement as well. So let's run a test, and then we can generate a commit of these improvements. I'll put them in separate commits as well, so that they're easier to look at. So let's do the first one that we did earlier. So first commit in this chain will be add socks proxy option to registry client to match NiFi client from PR253. So that's one commit, one change. Then we will do another commit for the second change. We do not want to commit that. That is a formatting improvement. minor linting improvement. That can be in here, that's fine. And then in Canvas, there is a bug fix, fix bug where get process group would not populate standard attribute when retrieving via UUID instead of name. That's another fun bug. This can be in a separate commit because it's separate stuff. Suggest object position is separate stuff. These are just little bug fixes that I'm including. Yeah. Okay, and what's in utils? That's the linting. Okay, so those two can be those bug fixes. Another commit for suggest object position and schedule processor. Cool. So suggest object position. Now, what was the issue number? Yeah, so 248. So we'll say fixes 248 introduces or adds canvas dot suggest object position to provide the next available slot for a new canvas object. Yeah, cool. Okay, and then these tests are running just over that change I made to schedule. We can make a commit for that. Then I think we're doing pretty good. So we're nearly at 2 hours. We have done some good stuff. We've had some features. So I'll get these up. I'll comment on those issues so that people know that we've got some stuff that they can look at to see if it helps them. And it's been another good day of getting shit did, which makes me happy. Thank you for tuning in. See, we've got some people left, so thanks for hanging out. Hope you've enjoyed the tunes and me forgetting entirely how to do a list comprehension in Python and why you can't just address everything by properties when dealing with dicts. I would rather add iterables to those objects. I think that's a good idea in future. I might add an issue for that when we revamp the client to just provide native iterable on everything, all the standard data type objects that we're importing from Java. Would make things a lot simpler, but it's not a problem for today. Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.